Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know the weather may not be the best for you, but you are here and we are happy to see you. Thank you for coming. This work session of the Board of Trustees of the Spring Independent School District is officially called to order on Thursday, November 4th. The time is now 6:03 p.m. Board trustees present: Carmen Carrera, Kelly Hodges, Deborah Jensen, Justine Durant, Natasha McDaniel, and myself, Rhonda Newhouse. I would like to ask everyone to turn off or silence their cell phones or any electronic devices that you may have at this time, please. Thank you. The first order of business this evening is a review of the minutes from previous meetings. Does any trustee have any changes or corrections to the minutes of October 7th, 2021 board work session, the October 12th, 2021 regular meeting, or the October 18th, 2021 special call session? Hearing none, these items will be submitted as part of the consent agenda at the November 9th Board of Trustees regular meeting. We will now hear from our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Rodney Watson.
Thank you, President Newhouse and other trustees and guests in the audience. Good evening. Tonight, we have a very robust agenda tonight. We're going to start off with two presentations. If you think back this time last year, there were a lot of questions regarding attendance. In addition to that, some of you, well, some of us were at the MASBA meeting, had the opportunity to participate in our annual attendance walk. And so today we thought it would be nice to be able to show you some more data or some more information from behind the scenes as it relates to the work that happens to ensure our students are able to graduate. Just recently, I did send you all an email, and we celebrated at our principals meeting that we've had so far this year already 15 graduates that have gone through our ASAP program and gotten their credits made up to be able to graduate. And so we're continuing to push that work forward. And so Ms. Westbrook will lead us in a conversation with the team regarding the comprehensive attendance plan. In addition to that, last month, we had the opportunity to show you and review with you our beginning of the year data. That is always one part of what we do, is showing you the data and the results. But tonight, we're going to talk with you a little bit more about literacy and the actual work that goes behind wanting to improve those scores. And so Dr. Hinojosa and her team will be going over the literacy plan with you all as well. This does conclude my general announcements, and I'll save the rest for Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. Our next item is agenda participation. This item allows members of the public an opportunity to speak on agenda items before those items are considered by the board. Mr. Brinkley, do we have anyone registered to speak, excuse me, under agenda participation?
No, Madam President, we do not.
Excuse me. So we will continue with our next item. I'd like to recognize our Chief Financial Officer, Ann Westbrooks.
Thank you, President Newhouse. Good evening, Dr. Watson and members of the board. As we all know, our number one priority here in Spring ISD is our student outcomes. And last month, as Dr. Watson mentioned, you all saw our presentation on our beginning of the year data that helped us assess where our students were and their academic progress that they had made at the beginning of the school year. So this evening, we're bringing forward another component of student outcomes, and that's the student attendance information. And it's been a collaborative effort across several departments to develop the processes and procedures to ensure that our students are in class on campus, because we know that is the first step towards their academic success. And so you have at your seats a teal folder that has a copy of the presentation. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Kelly Klein, our Assistant Superintendent of Federal and State Programs, and she'll help guide us through this presentation.
Thank you, Ann Westbrooks. We're just having some technology issues right here, and there we go. Perfect. Good evening, everyone. I am so happy to introduce our comprehensive attendance team and let you know what's going on with attendance in Spring ISD. You should have a PowerPoint presentation in front of you so you can follow along. I'd first like to introduce members of our team. We are tiny but mighty, and as you can see, we are cross-departmental, right? Have you ever seen police officers joined hand in hand with central office? It's a wonderful sight to see. So we have Thomas Graham, our Director of Student Affairs, Becky Domain, our Director of Data Management and Compliance, Robert Tyler, Lieutenant, Max Tolliver, Lieutenant, and Westbrook, CFO, Ken Colcraft, Chief of Police. And we also have two members in the audience that we will recognize later who are our truancy officers. At this time, I'd like to talk about our student outcomes and our goal for attendance. We want to move from 93.6% in 2019 to 95.1%. And the reason that we're here today is to let the board know how we're supporting the campus with their attendance goals. We want to make sure that all of our students are in class learning. Okay? And if they're not in class learning, how can we as a team, right, bring them back to class and have them sitting in the classrooms, almost like a wraparound service. Okay, also with having our students in the classroom, there's a funding aspect to it. So first and foremost, we want our students in class learning. And of course, the residual effects is making sure that we have a strong funding source to make sure we have resources for our students. And I'm going to let Thomas talk about our current attendance strategies.
So right now, some of our current attendance strategies that you all are aware of, we have already had our success walk. We have another success walk scheduled for February. We've made sure that each campus has a campus attendance coordinator that will focus primarily on attendance for that particular campus. We've entered into a partnership with Therapeutic Outreach, Assurances Therapeutic Outreach, also known as ATO. They're primarily working with behavior on our campuses, but they're also assisting with attendance as well. And we've also worked with CASA this year to help with our enrollment aspects. And last but not least, we have our comprehensive attendance plan.
Okay, so we're going to talk now about the plan. And this is the team that's put this plan together. When we look at it, there's actually three parts to it, which is the immediate action steps, the monitoring system, the makeup hours, and the monthly attendance committee. Part B is when we have to do the action part of recovering our students that are truant. And then actually there's a part C, which is a runaways plan, which was great to add to this plan last year, and we're moving forward with it this year. I'm going to turn it back over to Thomas, and he'll talk about the truancy preventive measures plan.
So the main aspect of our truancy preventive measures plan is to ensure that we have a 90% goal for our students in terms of attendance, so that we can ensure that they have their credit. We have some immediate actions that we're going to take with that, including sending out notification to students about the importance of the 90% attendance rule. We have our monitoring system that we have set up with 3 different tiers of instruction that we're looking at for that. We have our makeup hours, and then we also have our monthly attendance committee meetings. With our 3 tiers that you see of instruction that we're focusing on in terms of intervention, that bottom tier is where we're going to interact with all of our students. That's the most tier where all those particular students who have attendance issues will be taken care of and will be addressed in that area. Tier 2 gets a little more structured, and we have different aspects that we've included in the plan to focus on those. Tier 3 is when we have our most serious students that we're working with those students, and we also already have individuals, including our ACSs. Those are academic completion specialists that can work with those students that are already stationed on the high school campuses, but we also have them assigned to some of our middle school campuses and also to work with some of our elementaries. Also, we have our monthly attendance committee meeting. With that monthly attendance committee meeting, that's something that each campus is expected to do because it follows board policy that we have outlined for you. The CACs for the campus facilitate that campus attendance meeting. During that campus attendance meeting, they have a list of different items that they need to cover during those meetings. Those meetings are then, the agendas for those meetings are then submitted to my office, and we report that information back to the district, to the assistant superintendents.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Of course, that we know in Spring ISD, the data drives our decisions and what we do. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Data Management Compliance to talk about their part in the truancy prevention measures.
So the first thing starts with teachers taking attendance. So once teachers take attendance at the official attendance time each day, a robocall goes out to the students that were marked absent 30 minutes after the official attendance time. So for each set of schools, it's a different time, elementary, middle, and high. And so once that robocall goes out, lets the parents know so they can, send notes in and things like that. The attendance clerk on the first day of every week will run a trends by period report for students that have 3 or more unexcused absences within a 4-week period. So they're going to look at that report and make sure that the data is correct. Then they're going to hand it over to their campus attendance coordinator. The campus attendance coordinator will also review that report for accuracy and determine which students need further action. And at that point, those students that need further action will be turned over to the police department for the truancy officers to do their part. And that's where Lieutenant Tyler picks up.
Great, thank you. Since we talked about the truancy officers, we have Officer Arnold and Officer Perry in the audience. Would you please stand up and recognize? Thank you. So this is part B, right, of the truancy prevention measures. So it's the DMC is what drives the data. Okay, then we pass it on almost like a 4x1, right? And we pass it off to our police department. So Lieutenant Tyler.
Thank you. As a support of the district, we divide our district in west and east side. So we have 6 officers on the east, 6 officers on the west. To go out, we call it a knock and talk. So if we go out and have conversations, we're trying to provide services to our students, which fall in the feeder patterns and zip codes. So it may fall on the side of the west side. So we have 6 officers to be able to support that side, or we have 6 that support the side of the east. And so if we do not make any contacts with the parent or guardian at the time, we have a door hanger to let the parent or guardian know that we did try to make contact and we have additional services and resources for that parent. And if we do make contact with the parent, we have actually a script that's written out for the parent. So the officers will fill out a script where they have the officer's name, who made contact, if it was on the east or west side of the district. Then we also have the campus, if it was Westfield, for an example, if it was Spring High School, for an example. Date and time. Then we have the student ID, home address, the subdivision or apartment complex. And then we also want to solicit feedback from our parents or guardians on any type of service that we can provide as a district to support them to get our students back into the school district.
Great, thank you. So right now we have, once again, this is prevention, right? We're going out to the homes now, hanging out these door hangers, talking to parents to make sure that we can find out why their child is absent from school and what Spring ISD can do to bring them back to school in a safe manner. Then after so many more absences, right, then that's when we go back to Thomas Graham, and he's now is in collaboration with our truancy officers.
So moving forward, our truancy officers and I will work together to make sure that we have all of our students who are going through that truancy process, that they have a uniform process, and also that we can make sure that we're instilling all of the different items and all of the different functions to support these students before it gets to that truancy measure. So the flow chart that you see in front of you right now focuses on the campus attendance team. That campus attendance team is part of that same team that's going to meet each month during those monthly campus attendance committee meetings. From there, it will go to that CAC that I spoke to you about earlier. That CAC is going to be that first point of contact that will look at that information for that particular campus to make sure that the campus has done everything that they can before we get to that truancy process. After that, it goes to a group of 5. The courts have established that you have to have a group of 5, at least 5 different individuals on the campus that review truancy processes for a student before it progresses any further. Typically, that group of 5 is going to also be members of that attendance committee committee team. From there, it moves to our ACSs. Now, our ACSs are primarily stationed on our 3 comprehensive campuses. They stay there during that, and their work hours are during that particular time. But I've assigned those ACSs to middle schools, and they also have some elementaries. Once that gets to that point, the elementary campus or middle school campus or high school campus that has a student that they're looking at for truancy and has passed the group of 5 will go to the ACS. The ACS will make sure that they have all of their truancy information, they have all of their documentation, that they've exhausted all of the measures on the campus before we need to move forward. From that point, it will go to me, in my office. I will sit down with Officer Arnold, make sure that Officer Arnold has everything that he needs if we're going to move forward. If at that time we discover that, there's something else we could have done, or there's some other steps we can take, we'll send it back to the campus to work with that particular student. But if Officer Arnold and I both agree that everything is in line, then it will go to the court, and Officer Arnold will take that information to the court system.
Thank you. So that's our truancy process. However, we do have a small community of runaways in the district. And we spoke to the principals at the last principal meeting to let them know who we are and that we support them on their campuses. And so Lieutenant Tolliver is the one that spearheads our Runaway Project.
Thank you. By definition, a runaway is defined as someone that is under the age of 18 years of age, that have left home overnight, and the parents are not aware of where they are. One of the things that we are doing very intentionally is here on November 17th, we're ready to meet with the counselors and the homeless liaisons, trying to figure out a way that we can support the students. Because essentially that's what we want to do. We want to get those students back home with their parents at the residence. One of the things that are important that we're telling those on campus is all we just need them to do from the police department is, if you hear that a kid is running away, give us a call, and then we're going to actively pursue trying to make sure that we can get that kid home, providing resources with our community partners to make sure we get that kid back home to a safe place and back to school, but also providing those resources to them after we get them back home.
Did you mention the meeting on 11/17 you're going to have?
Yes,
Very
ma'am.
good.
November
Very
17th.
good. So at this time, this concludes our presentation. Are there any questions from the board, cabinet, or members of the audience?
Hi, thank you all so much for this thorough presentation. I did have a question. I didn't quite, I see that the goal is 90 to increase the student attendance rate by 1.5% to 95.1%. But the goal is 90%. Is that did I see that somewhere that
The
No,
90
that-
Go ahead.
So
What
that's the difference. That's 90%. That's for credit. So students have to be present 90% of the time to earn credit. And that
Okay.
would fall under Thomas's purview.
okay.
And that, I can show you that slide. If you want some more information on that, it's right there.
Okay, thank you. Let me read that.
I want to also thank you for the presentation and the very detailed information. I would like to know throughout the process, what step and what time do we see the most success? What activities are we doing that we glean the most success? And where do we still have challenges?
I think that Tom is going to speak to that since he works closely with the campuses.
Could you reiterate that question, please?
Where do we see the most success in identifying and getting our kids back and their attendance improved throughout the process? What step and activity we do that gleans the most success? And then where do we have opportunities?
Well, one of the biggest aspects that we have, our largest pool of success, will probably be working with some of our dropout specialists, because those individuals actually work with those students. They work with their dropout list of students.
Mhm.
Any students that have excessive attendance issues, those administrators are working with our ACSs with those particular students right now. So that's going to be our biggest bang, but we also have, that's also where we see our biggest loss with our kids are typically in our high school areas. And that's why they're right now stationed at our comprehensive high schools. So they do a major job in trying to get a lot of our students back. But they're again stationed at our comprehensive high schools, and the majority of their work is done on those comprehensive high schools. They're still helping with some of our middle schools, and on our middle school and elementary levels, those go more so to individuals who are going out to the campuses. Our ATOs have been very, very helpful with that too, because they can also do home visits with students. So that's been a big push for us as well. Some areas of growth that we could have with that, possibly having more individuals that can focus on duties similar to the ACS throughout different levels of our campus and district.
Thank you. That's exactly where I was going. So dropout specialists are critical, as well as the ATOs, and we do have an opportunity for some increases with our ATOs. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit more about your meeting on November the 17th with the counselors and homeless liaisons. What do you expect to accomplish?
So one of the things that I expect to accomplish is just so they can be aware of how the police department does play a part into be able to build that collaboration with them. When I go on November 17th, I just want to know, hey, I want them to know is when they receive this information from the students, all they just need to do is really just tell us. Just giving them that outline of how we can help support them. Most of the kids that we're dealing with does have other things going on when they're running away. And a lot of these kids, they already build relationships with. So when we're actively investigating and looking, they already know the students. So now we're bridging that gap to say, hey, what you know, let's bring it together with the police department so we both can actively be able to help the kids that are there.
I would have expected your counselors to know before November 17th who the homeless students are, or who's not here, that there should be some communication from them to you before November 17th to be able to reach out to these students.
I can address that.
Is there any, has there been any?
Yes, I can address that question. So about 2 months ago, when we got back together, of course, we were a team last year when we were dealing with asynchronous attendance. And this year when we came back together, one of the officers retired. And so Lieutenant Tolliver took over the position, taking care of the runaways. At that time, when he came on board, I set up a meeting with Dr. Crystal Collins, who's our counselor of guidance and counseling, is our director of guidance and counseling, along with their homeless liaison, which is Glory B. Burgess. And we spoke to them. So we already have those children identified, the homeless ones identified. And so there's communication back and forth between Becky's office and my office and the schools to make sure that we provide the needed resources to our homeless students. As far as the runaways, as I said, this is a fairly new initiative that we're trying to get a tighter grip on in Spring ISD. So Crystal knows, and she's communicated this to the counselors. However, this is the first time we're going to be in front of the counselors face to face on 11/17.
So I have a couple of questions, clarifications, really. I just want to make sure I understand. On page 8, where you talk about the universal strategies to encourage good attendance for all students, does that consist of any sort of education to the parents from the police department, like in addition to whatever we normally do?
Could you repeat that for us again, please?
So you mentioned universal strategies to encourage good attendance for all the students. Is there any sort of parent education to help these parents understand, why attendance matters that's coming from the police department?
Not so much coming.
Or from yes.
Okay, from my department,
Yes.
one of the immediate action steps is that we really want to share the importance of the 90% rule with our parents and our stakeholders in the district. One of the common aspects that we're seeing, especially coming up around this time as well, we see students might have really good attendance for a period of time until it gets to the holidays. And then students might leave out of the country and they'll be gone for a while. And we need to reaffirm to those students and those parents the importance of that 90% rule. Another issue that we're experiencing when I'm going on the campuses and having those conversations are individuals who are keeping their children out because of COVID. And they said, well, we're waiting to get COVID tests. So we need to, again, reaffirm to them the importance of the 90% rule and understanding that your student might be able to still have good passing grades, but if they don't meet that 90% rule, it's really important. And that's one of those first immediate actions that we want to communicate to all our stakeholders in the district.
And I'd like to expand on that, the universal strategies. There's actually on our website under attendance, it's called the Attendance Center. And that is a website that Thomas's group supervises. And we often use that when we talk to principals. There's many strategies on there that schools use to encourage and talk to parents about the importance of attendance. So I guess at your leisure, you can visit that page. It's called the Attendance Center on the Spring ISD website. And as I said, the principals use it often, and even with meetings with parents, and actually even the FACE department, the Family and Community Engagement Department, Trina Carroll, when she speaks to parents, she often cites that website as well.
Okay. And then, thank you. And then on page 10, you mentioned on the truancy prevention measures part being the attendance clerk runs the report. You mentioned that the robocalls will go out to the parents, and then the campus attendance coordinator, the next step would be to contact the district's, the truancy officers. Is there, I think you mentioned this in another part, and I just want to clarify, there is contact with the parents from the campus between, I guess, the robocall and the truancy officers, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So the slide 8, nope, sorry. Slide 13. So it'll go, when it goes to the campus attendance coordinator, it then starts the process of the campus attendance team to the campus attendance coordinator, the group of 5. So it goes through that process.
Okay.
So it goes from the attendance clerk to the campus attendance coordinator. Through that whole process, the campus attendance coordinator is overseeing it until it gets to the police department.
Okay.
And of course, we know that the teachers are also responsible for monitoring their attendance. If they have students that are not in attendance, they're the first point of contact with the family.
Okay. And then my last question is for students or families where the student is probably in the older, in high school, where the kids are having to take care of parents for some sort of reason. Do we have any sort of extenuating circumstances, or do we have it kind of outlined to make sure that those kids don't end up falling into the wrong bucket?
It's interesting you say that. We were actually just dealing with a situation with that from a student from, I believe it's Spring High School. Just right now, and the student is not documented as a legal U.S. citizen. So the student is doing a lot of work right now to pay for a lawyer. And in that particular situation, our ACS on that campus, excuse me, it's Westfield. Our ACS for that campus is working very diligently with that student to try to keep her still going with us. And we actually work with Ms. Stacy Rogers over at ASAP, our principal at Stacy Smith at ASAP, sitting down with her and communicating with her and the ACS. We were able to get that student start to look at our night school program. So that student is looking at our night school program, but we have to wait for it to start. Like even in that time while we're still waiting for it to start, my ACS is continuing that communication with them because we don't want her to just say, okay, well, I'm done. I'm not going to come to school anymore. So when those students are still very receptive and they still really want to go, our ACSs do a really good job of still keeping that information and still working with those students as much as possible.
And so I know that we're getting kind of an overview of the policy. I just want to make sure that that's written in somewhere, and that's my suggestion, I guess, or request, is just to make sure, because programs come and go, people change, and I just want to make sure that those specific situations, the kids don't end up falling through.
Yes, ma'am.
I know earlier you said we had 6 truancy officers. Did you say 6 on one side and 6 on the other? So he's really trying to get a little clarification on how many do we have, and is it their sole responsibility, or is it a shared role?
We currently have 2 truancy officers, which is Bruce Honor and Lucretia Perry.
Okay,
And then we have 12 patrol officers,
well,
which are assigned to the east and the west side to help support the truancy.
That's the 12, okay. That confused me. I was like, I didn't know we had 12.
Okay. I just wonder for students who are, what supports are in place for students to stay on track academically once they're identified as this is a student with chronic absences? How do we, because it talks about early intervention for students who need more support. What does that look like?
Well, that can look at a lot of different ways on a lot of different campuses. So if we were to say on an elementary campus per se, if you had a situation on the elementary campus where a student was having trouble, I've had some principals and some CACs that go to the extent of still sharing work with that student while they're out, but still not encouraging that student to be out, but they can still keep up on that work. Some of our middle schools have done similar processes as well. Some of our high school students are working in somewhat similar processes, but it's a little more delicate when it gets to that level at high school in terms of making sure they get the work. Unfortunately, the biggest bang for them actually making sure that they get their work turned in and actually can still hear the lessons and get the information that's being conveyed in the classrooms are getting the students to come back to the class. And in our elementary and our middle schools, that tends to be of a situation where we have to rely more so on the parent. That has a lot to do with that in a lot of cases. However, in our high school areas, especially more so when we have our seniors and juniors in that area, we can communicate more directly with those students to work out different ways for them to get back on campus.
I'm wondering if that may be sort of like an identifier or something when it comes to their academics, maybe like interventions. There may be a student who may be considered for intervention based on their attendance.
They would still fall within that program, especially when we're looking at academically for that. That's something that would fall within that realm for RTI and for working with that particular student, because more than likely, if they're not coming to school, their grades are suffering. So we attack it more so from the attendance side, but the campus and the RTI and the curriculum specialists will attack it more so from the
And work
academic
together.
side.
Yeah, just to make sure they don't slip through the cracks for sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I have a question about perhaps a specific problem with absenteeism, and that is in my past experience, sometimes single mothers who have to be in at work when a child is sick, they'll use the older daughter to stay home and take care of the children or the sick child. And this wasn't just an infrequent thing. It was something that was rather common when I was working with schools. Do we have that problem in spring?
So I can speak to that. So yes, I think that's a problem everywhere. So yes, it still happens often. There is a caveat on the 90% rule, so that for these special circumstances that I think someone else had asked about special situations. So if we know of situations like that, if a student has been in attendance at least 75% of the time, but less than 90% of the time, an attendance committee can convene and say, what is this particular student situation? Is this particular student situation a situation that they could not avoid? And so if that would definitely be the situation. So if there could be, the attendance committee could put special measures into place for that student, like if she were falling behind in her courses, or if she were passing those courses, they could override the 90% if she has been there at least 75% of the time.
That's the CAC that does that, makes that decision?
I believe so, yes. Well, it's going to be that whole attendance committee, that group of 5.
Is there anything that you believe could help with attendance that you aren't able to implement? today?
Well, I think that, you know, of course, we all have a lot of wishes, right? But But right now, truthfully, last year was a struggle for all of us,
Mhm.
right, during COVID, but this
pandemic,
team
yeah.
came together and we worked hard with the schools and we filled any gaps that were missing. And to look at this team, you know, I'm very proud of the work that we did.
Mhm.
And with the resources that we have, we can work it out. I think if there's any resources left, we want them in the hands of the students and we'll find a way to make sure that we get those students into the classrooms.
And I do think that TEA did us a favor this year in that they added a new attendance code for a reason for a student to be absent from school but still be counted present for funding. So it doesn't count toward that 90% rule. And that's critical illness or critical or severe illness. And we just used it the other day because it's so new that usually they'll send the documentation our way. So we had a student that was at Cypress Creek. They obviously cannot attend school while at Cypress Creek. And so we had all the information. And so for those, I believe, 9 days, which is a significant period, it was considered a critical illness because the student could not function at school at that time or do any work. So those were actually counted as present codes. So they didn't count against the student or the district because the student was not capable of completing schoolwork.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely.
So that did help the student and the district both so that it's not a detriment to the student.
I want to thank you again, and I want to thank Ms. Klein for her response when she spoke about resources and that it's important to keep them where students need the most. So thank you.
I did have one more question. I know this is kind of a fairly new process, I think, that we're putting together. Is there, and what is an oversight kind of function? If after a certain time, is there a group where we get together and we say, okay, this has been working, this hasn't been working, here's what we need to do to change it? Has that kind of been embedded into this
Yeah,
policy?
so this team, of course, is led by Ann and, Ms. Westbrooks and Chief Culpers. And we meet once a month and we discuss, have we met our goal? What do we need to change? And as all of us, we've had to be very nimble this year or last year and this year and pivot. So really the children in the district decide the direction in which we go. And so if we need to concentrate on the east side more, then that's what we do, or the west side or the elementary. We're just here to make sure that the students are in the classrooms and learning.
Thank you so much.
I have one more question. You mentioned the east side and the west side. Do we have, and I may have missed this, numbers? Is there one side of the district more so than the other side that has an issue with attendance?
Tyler?
Do we have those figures?
Those are possibly figures that I could probably get together for you though. We don't have them right now,
Okay,
but those are figures we could probably get together for you now.
all right, thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that concludes everyone's questions and we appreciate your presentation on our comprehensive attendance plan. Thank you.
All right.
We look forward to how this is coming along throughout the year, so please be prepared to keep us posted.
We'll be back if you'd like us to be.
Okay. As we continue tonight, for our next item, I'd like to recognize our Chief of Innovation and Equity, Dr. Lapita Hinojosa.
Thank you, Ms. Newhouse, Dr. Watson, and members of the board. I'd like to invite our team up. As you heard from the superintendent earlier, we do want to bring a follow-up to the presentation that we did last month, where we shared with you how our students were doing with their beginning of the year screener data. At this time, we want to go through and talk about what it is that we are implementing in our schools as well as supporting here centrally. And so with us, we will start off with our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Workforce Development, Dr. Parasol, Matt Parasol. And with him, we have our Executive Director of Instructional Services, Ms. Marie Mendoza. She oversees literacy, the multilingual programs, as well as the gifted and talented programs. And also we have Dr. Talisa Edwards, and she's our Executive Director of Special Education. And so they'll start off the presentation for us, and we'll have some other guests with us. Dr. Parasol.
Good evening, President Newhouse, members of the board, Dr. Watson and cabinet. Our team is very excited to be able to share this update on literacy that has truly been a work that involved all of our stakeholders. So we wanted to start with the current state of literacy in Spring ISD. And we know that last month, Dr. Cobb came and shared with you the results from our screener data. As you remember, our screeners are taken at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of year. And so they help give us that data point to see where students are and the skills that they may be struggling on, as well as where we can work to continue to grow those that may be at grade level, move them above. So last month you did see our pre-K data, which utilizes the circle assessment. We also shared with you our K2 data, which now is M-Class. That was the transition from TPRI Tejas Lay. And so that is just for grades kinder through grade 2. And then the third assessment we shared was regarding grades 3 through 8, and that was our MAP data for BOY. And as was discussed last month, we're very excited about what the data shows already, where students were, with most of those grade levels being the 60% range. Historically, well, we tend to see numbers closer in the 30%, really speaking to the work that our teachers have done and the work through summer school as we work to close those gaps. So in discussing our approach to close those gaps in literacy, it always starts with our theory of action. That guides all of our work. That we know that when we have an aligned curriculum with those corresponding progress measures that we then support with differentiated professional development, and we ensure that it's implemented with fidelity, the result is going to be increased student achievement. That work and those concepts is what drove our stakeholder groups as they came together, that included students and teachers, district campus leaders and district leaders. And we came up with these beliefs. We believe that every student will be an accomplished reader, that every teacher is a literacy teacher, and that every day students will have multiple authentic opportunities to make meanings from text and express themselves through writing. In addition to those core beliefs, our literacy work is also tied to skill-based systems to build those strong readers. That it includes the use of all skills from listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking, as well as helping students make connections in the text to their real life and the world around them. And most importantly, that we are engaging our families as partners as we build student success together. And so we're tied to those beliefs is what drove our literacy response. The literacy plan update aligned directly to our theory of action. As you can see there, those elements are broken out for each area. And we're going to go through these with you tonight as we talk about the science of teaching reading. We talk about the milestones, the reading academies, as well as the data that we're using and how we're adjusting to derive and improve instruction. So we're going to start with our aligned curriculum. And I'm going to pass it over to Marie Mendoza, who is going to share with us the worksheet that has been leading with our Texas Reading Academies.
So as you know, in 2019, the state mandated that all teachers, kindergarten through 3rd grade, and principals and assistant principals attend and be successful in the state reading academy. This was under House Bill 3. And so we are in the middle of our progress with our teachers. We have over 400 staff members who are currently participating in the Reading Academy this current school year. Of course, we know that Reading Academy is based on the science of reading. And so when we think about the science of reading, there are 2 major components: language comprehension and word recognition. And we understand through Scarborough's work that when we put those two pieces together, we end up with skilled reading.
And so utilizing this basis of the science of reading, we needed to ensure that we equipped our educators with those resources. We had to make some hard decisions, as we shared with you towards the end of last year and during the summer, as we really looked at our curriculum. And we identified that need to have a greater support, more structures for our teachers, as well as ensuring that the curriculum we're rolling out is aligned to that science of reading and giving us the data that we can utilize to improve instruction. And so there were some changes where we transitioned to Amplify Texas for grades K through 8. We're still utilizing Savas in grades K through 2, Spanish, and then HMH for our high school. And all of that work was with driving that was to ensure that what we had was fidelity curriculum that was tied to the science of reading and yielding high literacy strategies at all grade levels. And here's a chart that we had shared with you before, and I know it's very bright. It's kind of got in the name, the rainbow chart, but we call it our core menu of the aligned curriculum. It is a helpful tool for teachers to be able to see what is it at each grade level and grade level band that we're using. It shows that alignment across the grade levels, as well as what supports do we have for our populations that may need some extra support, whether that be through RTI, special education, students who are English language learners, or dyslexia and RTI or 504. And so this lays out that map. All of the resources you see here were provided to every single teacher that falls in that band by the central office. So there weren't those purchase requirements directly on campus, as well as the training that supported them as well. On top of that, our instructional models were also aligned to the new curriculum to ensure that they align to our empowered learning model as we move from instruction that had in the past been more teacher-centered to teacher as a facilitator of the learning and engaging our students. Tied into every single instructional model is also time for small group instruction, where students rotate through independent learning stations and online supports, as well as that small group time with the teacher as they identify gaps that specific student needs and to close those gaps. And all of that is in addition to the 45 minutes that we have through all the grade levels for intervention as an extra period. But you don't have to take our word for it. We actually have a video we are excited to share with you today from one of our own teachers who's going to share her experiences utilizing Amplify.
My name is Lenice Catalan. I teach 4th grade self-contained at Aiken Row Elementary in Spring ISD. And you are going to do incredible. The Amplify program covers literacy. And so with the program, the students are building not only their reading, comprehension, and fluency skills, but also their writing skills. So today we are finishing up Unit 2. The students have been having different episodes, which are the lessons each day. And each lesson is based on a different challenge. So each day the students are collaborating to do different activities that are aligned with the TEKS. So they are using text evidence. They are reading through different biographies about various inventors. They are creating their own inventions. So a lot of project-based and authentic learning and teaching going on. They will be showing their pitch. So they are pitching in front of the class. They've created a diagram of their invention that they will use as their model. And they have created their own script from scratch. And the Amplify program has kind of built their skills, their writing, thinking skills up to this level for them to be able to create their own script, create their diagram, and present their pitch.
Well, if you don't know where to put your pencil, just put it in a pencil holder and then you'll be good to go.
I have seen monumental growth since the beginning of the year, and let me explain why. So I am used to teaching reading in isolation, and teaching those TEKs, those core foundational TEKs in isolation. And then by mid-year, as we push towards STAR, we kind of start spiraling. What this program does is that they spiral from the beginning. A lot of their heavy content is based around inferencing. And the students have the most challenge in drawing inferences because they have to use their text evidence and their schema. So building students up to that level is quite challenging as a reading teacher. But the way that the program is set up, the way that they're embedding and spiraling all of the different pieces up front, you can see just in the students' ability to comprehend, to read, to go back and find that text evidence, and to bring all those skills together. It is evident. It's giving me goosebumps right now. And not because I'm on camera, but it's giving me goosebumps because there's no program that I've ever honestly used that incorporates all of the things that I've named, along with some social and emotional learning tools as well. Just the ability to respect each other, to collaborate, to be able to communicate with each other, to each other with respect. I mean, those pieces, along with the actual content pieces, are all embedded. No program is going to be a success for you or for your classroom without the teacher believing in the program and what it can do. Also, the teacher understanding and knowing their students, knowing where they are, and having the ability to meet them where they are. Also, the teacher having content knowledge of the TEKs and knowing, okay, today I have a lesson coming from Amplify. What pieces are foundational? Which ones are readiness TEKs? Which ones are supportive? Which ones can I reinforce in the station because the students already know? Which ones do I need to focus on in my small groups for intervention? So those pieces are critical. And once you have them, you will be able to move your students. You might not see it right away. You might not see the movement right away, but stick with it and you will.
And so you can definitely see the excitement there in our teacher as well as in our students. And that's the great thing about Amplify, is that it truly helps meet the needs of all students, whether they're students being served in our multilingual programs, our gifted and talented programs, or in special education. And we don't want you to just take our word for it. Like I said, we have some teachers with us today, and I'm going to invite them up. Who you saw in the video, Ms. Catalin from Eikenrow Elementary, who is our grade 4 teacher, is going to come up and join us. Miss Alexander, she's an adaptive behavior teacher for the special education program at Thompson Elementary. And Miss Liao, she is a teacher at Booker who teaches 5th grade reading in our bilingual program. In addition to our teachers, I know we do have representation from the schools as well. So if I could have the principal stand at this time, who are here. Ms. Remington is here. And I know there were many events happening. We also did want to recognize Ms. Platt, who came up. Ms. Emerson was unable to be with us tonight. And she is also a teacher of reading at Thompson Elementary. She also serves in special education. So I kind of have some questions for you guys. I'll start with Ms. Catalan. So the video of your class, it was inspiring. We definitely saw that engagement of your students. Can you share with us how Amplify grows your students' reading ability while keeping the learning fun? It was definitely fun what we saw.
Yes, absolutely. First, good evening. Thank you so much for having us, Dr. Watson, Ms. Newhouse, as well as the board members. So Amplify is an exceptional program. It's been highly impactful for our students on our campus so far this year. Last week, we took a district checkpoint and we were comparing data between the BOI assessments that the students took in August up until now to see what kind of impact Amplify has really had on the students. And when I mean to tell you, we have had double-digit gains, not only for our tier 1 students, but tier 2 and tier 3 in certain challenging TEKs. Some of the most rigorous TEKs actually for 4th graders when it comes to reading and comprehension. So just seeing that data has not only fueled me to be able to support my students, but also to help support the other teachers on the campus that I serve, to believe in the program and also to implement it with fidelity.
Thank you so much. Ms. Liao, so could you share with us how Amplify has helped you deliver instruction, specifically in that area of vocabulary for students who are English language learners?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. For me, Amplify, I love that they integrate the vocabulary. They add parts of speech, the definition, and also what page the students can find the vocabulary words in. They also include cognates, which are words that they look, words in English that look very similar to words in Spanish, like refrigerator, refrigerador in Spanish, which help our students, especially my bilingual students, make the transition into reading and writing smoothly.
Thank you. And Ms. Alexander, so as a adaptive behavior teacher, we know you have multiple grade levels and are also teaching multiple content. So can you share with us how it has helped you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me out, first of all. One of the things that I really love about the Amplify program is that it provides me everything that I need in the teacher edition. It provides me with a lesson at a glance, which lets me know, should I do this in whole group instruction? Should it be small group? Not only that, how long the lesson should be. It provides me with common misconceptions that the students will have. So I no longer have to go searching for that on my own. It's already included, as well as a script. It provides a stop here and ask this thought-provoking question. And like you said, I do teach multiple subjects within my classroom. So it does help ease the burden on me as a teacher because I don't have to spend as much time planning with my student, planning to teach my student.
Awesome. And then I have one question that kind of each of you could answer for us. And that's more about it's a huge task with a new curriculum and transitioning. So can you tell us like what type of support is being provided to you as you work to implement it?
On our campus, we are working closely with our campus instructional leadership team during PLCs. So we're internalizing the lessons. We're talking about what intervention pieces Amplify may not have that we should build in to meet the students' needs, because we do have a lot of gaps on our campus. Well, we probably have them across the district, but we talk about those intervention pieces. We do ABATs. We support one another because we have members of our team that may have different years of experience. So they do need that support as well. So we are working closely with our instructional team to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the students.
I also like that the district is providing Credentialing representatives from Credentialing, which is the company that does Amplify, to come to our buildings to actually give us the training. So if it's there, if we have any questions, they can help us, they can talk to us. So that has been of great help for us.
So one of the things that I do on my campus is, even though I am a self-contained teacher, I go and I collaborate and I plan with the other fourth grade teachers. I get to sit down with them and we go over the lesson at a glance. We determine what misconceptions we may have. We figure out what we need to do in order to make sure that the students are clear on the concept. And so that when I do get the opportunity to take my student to his out classes, we are already prepared because we're right on track with all the other teachers, because I have spent the time with those teachers planning to make sure that my lesson mirrors theirs.
Thank you guys so much. And we know that you may have some questions as well for anyone on our panel. So before we move on in the presentation, we did want to give time to answer questions.
I just want to say thank you for opening your classroom, Ms. Catalan. It's amazing to see the engagement, the enthusiasm in your classroom, the authentic learning opportunities. So thank you. And thank you to all the teachers, I'm gonna make sure I say it right, Ms. Liao and Ms. Alexander, also for coming to share your experiences. So I am wondering, you talked a little bit about you all kind of assess what else do we need that Amplify does not have. I'm wondering, what are your needs? If you had a wish list, what else would you add to Amplify, or what resources do you wish you had to enhance it even further? Anybody?
I guess I'll start. So the intervention pieces would definitely be added. And when I say intervention, I mean really teaching the foundational core TEKS that the students need before we begin spiraling. Because sometimes we might want to spiral up front, but the students don't have the foundational knowledge. And so we're having, as teachers, we're having to draw back to the drawing board and figure out, okay, what is it that these students actually need? What kind of mini lessons do I need to embed in this lesson? Even though Amplify might not show us that, we discuss that in the PLC so we can figure out, okay, we're going to start here and this is where we want to take them. However, those foundational pieces and those intervention pieces are very important to help fill the gaps.
So additional resources to help teach the foundational skills?
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Trustee McDaniel, if I understand your background, you are a reading specialist, aren't you?
Yes.
So-
As you can tell, I'm excited. So.
I was waiting for your questions. Okay, from what I could see up there, because I'm more science type, it looked like there was a design challenge that the kids had to use the language to accomplish the project. And that they're very excited about this design challenge and selling it to the classroom. And so they really got involved and we're learning at a faster rate than in past years with just reading assignments. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I can tell you in science, the same thing goes on, that if you have kids creating something that that needs to work, they suddenly get very interested in how those circuits go together or whatever, and they don't care if you were just teaching circuits, but building something real. So I just absolutely love the approach. I am very interested in how you adapt this to special learning challenges such as dyslexic students, or if you have a GT student that you want to challenge them a little bit more. And I'm sure there's more special situations you see with students. And I'm really interested in that, if you could describe a few of those.
So as a special education teacher here, I can actually speak to that because I have to go in and accommodate the material for my student as well as the other students in the classroom. Because as I mentioned, although I am self-contained, I do spend quite a bit of my time in the general education classroom with my student. And one of the ways that we are able to accommodate for our students is we plan out 2 weeks ahead. So as I said, everything is provided in Amplify in the TE. So as we're planning, we're going through the TE, we're already making sure that we have the accommodations in place. Amplify is real text evidence heavy. So one of the accommodations that we have is that all of our students have highlighters, and all of our students are asked to go back to the text where they feel like the answer is and highlight it so that they're able to support their answer. And so because we know that our students that are not reading on grade level may have issues struggling, then that's where I come in and I get to sit with them and I help them prepare for the text evidence that they're going to have to find. For the other teacher who doesn't have a me in her classroom, we still talk about what it would look like for her to accommodate for her students that have special needs.
And I'd like to just add to that. I'm not sure if you all are aware, but Amplify also has a digital blended learning piece that is accompanied with the actual lessons that we give. And so it's differentiated, meaning the students are able to, the program meets the students at their needs, depending on their level. So it doesn't matter if they're tier 1 or tier 3. I use that in my class during our rotations. So during our stations, one of the stations is technology. And so that program is able to meet the student where they are.
I think, I'm sorry, this lady, Miss Leal. Okay, Miss Leal, I think you mentioned that you had training from the Amplify program directors that came, teachers, I guess, that came out. are all of the teachers being trained by that, or is it just a group of you and you go back and train the teachers? How is this outlined? I'm seeing literacy, but I'm also thinking, and I see gifted and talented, but I'm also thinking of science and math, social studies. How are they all able to incorporate this as well?
Yes, since Amplify is new this year, they're actually having all of the Amplify teachers, all the teachers that are using Amplify attend this trainings. So we're getting divided into sessions so that it's actually, the numbers are low too, so it's more one-on-one. And so we're able to ask questions, they're able to kind of meet us in the middle as well and give us all the information that we might not know about the program since they're more equipped to do that. And so they're going to our campuses. So they have it at one campus and a couple of us will go to the trainings at a time. And so we meet at a campus. So there's maybe 3 to 4 campuses that meet at one. And so we go by upper grade level. Since I teach 5th, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, which are the ones using Amplify, we will meet there. And it's during the school day, so which is also good because they provide coverage for us as well.
On my campus, all teachers, 3rd through 5th, are actually working asynchronously through the online version of Crimsy. So we receive the online version of the training, and it's self-paced. We are actually working on our own in our own free time, and they have pre-recorded lessons. So it's a Canvas course that we're signed into, and it's broken down into 7 sessions. And each session has an asynchronous portion where a video has been pre-recorded, and it provides us with resources to use throughout the video. And it provides us with the opportunity to do such things as backwards planning, as determining common misconceptions that students will have. And it helps prepare us for our lesson planning and our PLCs. It's actually been a lifeline for me because I'm a news teacher here at Spring. And so I'm able to learn this new program at my own pace. Whenever I need it, I can go back to it and use it as a resource.
I'm glad you said you were a new teacher to let me know, because I was curious as to whether we are utilizing our teacher location for teachers to come and, I guess, demonstrate in front of other teachers. I don't want to take up all of your evenings or Saturdays, but it could be during the day. But is there some teamwork and teachers that may be doing it 3rd, 4th, and 5th very successfully at one elementary versus another elementary that you guys get together and maybe share with them things that are working for you more so? Some type of teamwork at our Teach Up Center for teachers. Are you utilizing it?
Yes, ma'am. Certain campuses have a Amplify instructional coach. At our campus, it is our assistant principal. And she is coaching 2 teachers on our campus, myself and another teacher who teaches 2nd grade. And we are the blended learning leads. And so we meet maybe twice a month with the other blended learning leads from various campuses to discuss what the program is doing, what concerns the teachers may have, the blended learning digital piece. And so we bring that information back to the campus, share it with our campus instructional support leaders. And we also have other teachers within 3 through 5 and also the lower grades going to her classroom. But I have 3 through 5 teachers that come into my classroom to watch me model, to take notes, to be able to ask me questions. And so there's support on various levels, not only through Crimsy, but also through the coaching of our APs and in the blended learning leads as well.
And I'd like to piggyback on that. In addition to that, we have been doing sessions on Saturdays, full day sessions for teachers where they're coming up and learning about the curriculum that we've adopted, including Amplify. And there gives that opportunity for teachers to do some of that at batting. They're also doing that in their PLC sessions. Our curriculum specialists are going out to the campuses to support as well. And then we have all those coaches that are our digital learning coaches who are also directly working with the vendors and then providing providing on-site support. So that way it's helping to lessen the burden of teachers having to come out as well. We know how precious every moment is. And we've also done both face-to-face sessions on Saturday as well as online. Actually, one that we recently had over 125 teachers that came on online to be there for a Saturday.
Wow, wonderful.
Wonderful. We don't want to leave our new teachers behind, or we don't want to leave any campus behind. We want to bring all of our campuses up. So,
And to that end, is Amplify available at all of our campuses as teachers? Okay.
It's district-wide, and honestly, I'll talk to her coach. And so on every campus, there's also the administrators who serve as coaches. So in addition to the instructional coach they have that's also going through the Crimsey, and they're learning how to support their teachers, our principals and their APs are also going through that same program. And they all receive a stipend. So for coaches, they receive a $1,000 stipend from TEA, and for all of our teachers, they're receiving a $6,000 stipend to participate in all the after-school activities.
I think Natasha wants to apply.
Well, this is really exciting. And I can even see the excitement and the enthusiasm as you're speaking with us this evening. I just want to really thank you for being here, because true learning happens in that classroom between that student and that teacher. And I don't know about my colleagues, but we get excited when we have an opportunity to actually hear from our teachers and talk with you. So, and I know it's late in the evening, but we truly appreciate you.
Thank you.
Now we'll transition into corresponding progress measures. And something Ms. Catalan said was very important, and that was that intervention piece, right? We can take data, but it's what we do with the data that matters. And so we rolled out M-Class intervention for grades K through 2 at the beginning of school. As part, and it's tied directly to Amplify in the screener. TEA released a grant, a T-class grant, where districts could apply for different decision points. And I know Dr. Hinojosa and I were both excited when you shared that, because we just found out that we were awarded a point under tutoring and intervention, and we're actually going to be awarded M-Class. So we'll be able to expand that to grades 3 through 5. And so they'll be able to have that tool, completely scripted intervention lessons that from the assessment, they can say, these are the lessons to do. They're short 10-paced, and then they reassess, and they're able to identify, what the next burst is. So really an exciting program and a great opportunity from TEA that we will be rolling out shortly. So corresponding progress measure, I'm going to pass it over to Marie again to walk us through those outcomes.
Okay, so you can see on the slide that we have accelerated learning that will be implemented district-wide, with 65% of our students exceeding expected growth in reading in those areas. We are expecting 50% or more of our students in grades 3 through 8 and English 1 and 2 as measured as MET standard on the STAR assessment. And then we are expecting a 20% increase in student performance from beginning of year to end of year for our K2 students on M-Class.
And so as we look at each of those goals, we have a number of supports and milestones along the way to track as we make progress through. So you see a number of documents here, and in your packet, you actually have the larger versions of these. We know they're kind of small on the screen, so you can take a look. But we have, with our curriculum, it actually lays out by grade level, by month, what are those vocabulary words that we're working, that students are working and learning from. A document that allows us to clearly see that at this date, they should have mastered these words, that we can also send home with parents so that they're aware and we're working together throughout the course of the year. Additionally, there's essential milestones and expectations for every grade level across the different content areas. And we're able to utilize the data and the scores to identify where our students are, whether that be from our map data to our district benchmarks. We have clear roadmap to reach those goals. Moving on to number 3, which is our differentiated professional development.
So you'll see, as we've been talking just a little bit about our teachers and support for our teachers, what you have in front of you is an example of one of our teachers who is here regularly. It's not missing any time, right? No absences, but you can see how the student performance based on the star has not been making the progress that's necessary. And so because of that, we have designed, or we're implementing our professional learning to support our teachers. So what are we doing? So now we're shifting back to thinking about our our teachers who are in the Reading Academy. And so what we've done is we've come up with a system for micro-credentialing and really honoring the work that they're doing as they're moving through the 12 modules. And so you'll see on here, the first 6 modules and the micro-credentialing, the badging that we're looking at providing them as they move through all 12 of those modules. And then down below, and this might take a little more time, we're looking at the expert badge. So once they've gone through the 12 modules and received the micro-credentialing that you see across the top, we're looking at what we're calling an literacy expert badge. And that, to earn that badge, we're looking at teachers providing evidence that shows growth of 90% of their students making 1.5 years growth in literacy. And then for reading achievement, teachers will then provide evidence that demonstrates 80% of their students are reading on or above grade level by the end of the year. And that's how they will receive that expert literacy badge. We are also focused on literacy across all content areas. This ties back to our literacy belief that we believe every teacher in our district is a literacy teacher. And so we're focused on 3 main areas in this regard. Vocabulary instruction, as you've heard the teachers mention this evening, habits of discussion, and we just went through some professional learning with administrators this week during principals and associate principals meetings on how to support having structured academic conversations in the classrooms through habits of discussion. We're also providing that professional learning opportunity ongoing for our staff members, our teachers, not just our reading or literacy teachers, but all across all of our content areas. And then finally, the third area we're looking at is talk, read, talk, write. We know the importance of having conversations, providing students, particularly our special population students, the opportunities to activate their background knowledge through having a talk, and then providing them the opportunity to read something, coming back to clarify, to make sure that they understood what they read, and then to prepare them for the writing piece. So those are the 3 areas that we're focused on across all content areas.
The 4th is implemented with fidelity. And so through the partnerships, as we've worked across departments and with our assistant superintendents of schools, we've developed a plan to drive that implementation, working in partnership with our principals. And so there have been a number of documents developed that are called the literacy game plan that really provide guides and supports and timelines for our principals as they lead this work on their campus, including instructional rubrics and data debriefs. All of this goes together. It's not a single component. It's not just PD that you come and get or resources you come and get. Throughout this process, it is regarding continuous improvement, from the planning and data that we utilize in our PLCs and our GDAP process to what we're implementing and assessing in the classroom is what we taught, what was learned, and then the coaching and supporting that happens as we're adapting to the needs of our students and teachers. Throughout all of it, we're monitoring and evaluating to ensure that our students' gaps are being closed and students are reading above grade level. The timeline goes throughout this year. It started in the spring of 2021 with our literacy planning and developing this process. Continued on in the summer as we provided training to our teachers and administrators. We are in the implementation phase now and completing literacy walks on campuses, as well as supporting through our recent literacy fair and eSuccess Academies, as well as the ongoing support that we'll be delivering throughout this spring semester. All of it working together to build and celebrate literacy. That's the culture that we believe drives our students and our culture. We also engage families and communities. We are working to promote the value of reading and also empowering our families with the tools outside of the classroom. Because we know that when this plan is utilized with every student, every teacher, every day, there will be excellent equitable outcomes for all students, and the result will be increased student achievement. Thank you. Are there any questions for us before we?
Did have one question on the micro credentialing the way that you have that set up. Is there a typical time frame that the teachers have to complete that, or is it just kind of on their own?
Yeah. So the state has provided a timeline for us. And so, for example, we are in the process of, there are 12 modules. And so by December, it's an expectation that teachers get through the first 6 modules. And so there's a 60-hour requirement for teachers as they're going through the Reading Academy. There's a 42-hour requirement for administrators. So administrators have to submit artifacts as well, but at a different time in terms of the modules than the teachers. But the content, the topics are the same. It's just a little adjustment for that. But yes, there is an outline that's provided to us.
And this is kind of a rolling timeline for when you have new teachers as well. I guess, does theirs start when they first start? Or
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
So we started in August. It's an 11-month course. So our teachers and administrators will work their way through this course through July of next year. So we opted to begin in August with our teachers. And so, as I said in the beginning, every K-3 teacher must go through this Reading Academy, and every administrator on those campuses. We've also included coaches, so our literacy coaches, our digital learning coaches who are supporting literacy are also part of that. Our dyslexia teachers, I mean, we've got, and we even have a cohort for bilingual teachers that are going through that. But yes, it's an 11-month course. That's the way it was designed, the state level.
And we're excited that also it doesn't stop just with the certification through TEA, that for us, we have that literacy expert badge where there are certain high expectations, that will be challenging. The teachers may work for years to get, and we want that to be that point of pride. And the goals were the 1.5 years of growth for 90% of their students in a single year, and 80% of their students on or above grade level. And so those will be pieces that teachers can strive for, and then be able to show off those badges and their signature lines and social media as this, as the great accomplishment that it is, applying what they've learned.
One of the things that I don't want us to forget is when we first started talking about badging a while back, it was actually, we weren't even using the term badging. We were talking about performance management. Right. We talked about badging being something that we could differentiate performance management pay for teachers. And so not only will they just get intrinsic motivation, but it'd be tied to raises, and it may be tied to other incentives through our spring rewards program. And so that way it's really giving the teachers something to work for. They get the results and they get more compensation as well.
For the micro credentialing, I'm wondering, what is the plan or the steps in place? Like, how are we monitoring teachers' progress if there's someone who's struggling through the academies? Because we know it is mandated that they have to complete them successfully.
Yes.
What's the plan to ensure that teachers are successful?
Well, we have a team, and they're sitting in the back, of people that work with me. Denise is actually going through the Reading Academy, and she's also one of our coaches at the district level. And so she has set up meetings with that are like almost like open sessions. We had one during the literacy fair in October where we opened the room And we're sitting with them. Dr. Inosa was actually sitting in there with us and going through some of the content. If there are some questions that they may have, we're there to support them as they move through the learning. But Denise is the person on my team who's actually dedicated specifically to the Reading Academy and support.
So are we targeting teachers? So if we see, okay, this teacher is behind, we should be on module 6 by now. You know, how are they?
Yeah, so we are actually going through region 4. So our cohort leaders are through the service center. I get reports based on the outline that they provided us on the progress that teachers and administrators are making. And so I share that information. I've emailed kind reminders to some of the teachers. And then also for the administrators, I also keep the assistant soups of schools in the loop on where we are to make sure that they're making progress. As you may be aware, those teachers have to get through those first 6 modules before they turn in an artifact. That's a really critical piece here coming up in December. And so we are supporting to make sure that they're moving. I've gotten emails this week saying, Ms. Mendoza, I'm on module, and I'm not even gonna say where. I promise over Thanksgiving, I'm going to catch up. And so we have this open collaboration because I want our team to be seen as support, not as I gotcha. And the content is very dense. And so because it is so dense, it's that rope on steroids. Okay. So when you see that, those teachers really need the support and understanding. In addition to that, the instructional services team has begun instructional collaborative walks. So we started that this week. It'll be a 2-week window. So we're going out to monitor and support where are our teachers in terms of implementation, not as a you're not where you need to be. How can my team of 3 in the back support and coach and not just the teachers, but also the digital learning coaches. And so that's part of what we're doing.
So you mentioned that the content is dense for sure.
Yes.
How, or are there ways that the content is being integrated into PDs or integrated into PLCs? How does that look?
Yes. So our digital learning coaches are also part of the Reading Academy. On Fridays, I meet with them. They have created folders of artifacts that they are collecting, not just on the work that they're doing, but also their teachers. And so I've created a system to support, so I know where they're supposed to be. I know the content of what they are learning, and then we're looking at how is it being implemented.
Right.
I'm going to be honest with you, it is a lot of work. And so our focus is translating, I got this module done, I did the assessment, go to the next one, into what does it look like in practice.
Right.
And so that is part of our focus as we do our instructional walks and support. And on Fridays, most of the time they're on Fridays. On Fridays when I meet with them, they're having discussions. We've also started providing additional, as we think about the social emotional needs of our teachers, we have started giving them just little certificates of superstar status. You know, like you are a superstar, you finished the first module, because you know it's a lot, or your second module. So we're looking at micro credentialing. In addition to that, we understand everything that they're trying to implement with Amplify and now through Reading Academy, all these pieces.
Yes, that's why I'm asking about support.
Yeah,
Because
sorry,
there's
I
like
get excited.
But I think that's the exciting thing is that the curriculum ties into what they're learning. And so they're able to apply.
Thank you.
So kind of to piggyback off of her questions, where are we as a district? Like where are our teachers? Do we have a lot that are still kind of behind where they should be, or are we kind of ahead of the curve? Kind of where are we?
We are right now over 400 staff members participating in this Reading Academy. As you know, about 2 years ago in 2019, there was a READ grant. And so we had a small cadre of people who went through that. And then last year we had another small cadre of people who went through the Reading Academy. This year, we have 5 cohorts of up to 100, well, it's a little less than 100, but a large number of staff members who are in the process. And so part of the plan was that we would first this year get kindergarten and first grade and support for our bilingual teachers. They're in the biliteracy cohort. And then our administrators, that plan was for first grade, kindergarten and first grade teachers this year. Our plan for next year is second and third, and any new teacher who has not gone through the Reading Academy in some other district in the state. And so that's kind of the way we have designed it.
So you got around 100 this year, roughly. is what you're saying.
It's over 400 staff members total. Each cohort can have up to 100, except the administrator cohort. That is limited, not by us, but as the way it was designed, up to 55 administrators.
So I guess my question was kind of in the process of the timeline that the expectation of certain modules kind of being completed by December.
Yes.
So my question is, of that group, where are we? Are our teachers kind of, because you mentioned, you've got a teacher that says, she promises that she'll get this done by Thanksgiving. Are we kind of where we're supposed to be, or do
we are in progress of where we're supposed to be? The reason I'm hesitating is because they just closed the window on October the 18th. They're sending me the report on November 12th. And so I could speak to you a little more about that next week. But on the 12th, they will send me a report that says, here are your teachers and how far they are along. Here are your administrators. They send it in a huge spreadsheet so I can see, and then we follow up. And these teachers now have developed a relationship with us. So they're saying, I know that report's coming because they have this. They know when it's due and when the report will come. And so I've been in direct communication with Region 4. And so they try to run those reports as close to the date that they're going to send them to me on the 12th so that people can get through those modules.
And I think the great thing is that we have those coaches who are also there to help support. And there's been a lot of progress. We see, even the ones that might have been behind a little bit, that they make those gaps and those strides. And that really speaks to the work that Marie and her team, as well as our instructional coaches, do in helping to move that forward.
Can Denise and the 3 in the back stand up so we can see them?
Yes. Stand up.
Thank you.
Please introduce them to us. Please introduce them, Ms. Mendoza.
Oh, sure. This is Denise Carter. She's the one I mentioned that is currently enrolled in the Reading Academy. Michelle Champeau and Pearl Ivory.
Out of curiosity, what does your shirt say? Literacy
and justice for all.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Love those shirts.
And I think we all agree, we're seeing. We appreciate your presentation,
Well, I
and
have
we're
one more.
truly seeing every student, every teacher, every day. Thank you. Thank you.
One more question, real quick.
Oh, one more question.
Sorry. We got excited about the shirt. Okay. So we talked about every teacher is a literacy teacher. I'm wondering, how are we training, supporting teachers that are in other content areas to ensure that they understand and know how they can integrate into their instruction as well?
So there was a slide in your presentation, which I think you have, that looks at those 3 areas of focus. Vocabulary instruction. We're specifically looking at Marzano's 6-step vocabulary across all content areas. This is nothing new. We have been utilizing it. I think the key piece that's different is our system of support with those ladies and the digital literacy coaches to support across all content areas. It's also part of the walks that the instructional services team is doing. Talk, read, talk, write, because we know, particularly for special populations, how important language is, and having the opportunity to speak before we read and then speak again to make sure we got it and then write. Those are all across the other content areas. And then finally, the professional learning that took place this week for administrators has been going on since the summer. And that is habits of discussion. And that's for all of those different content areas. We have a systematic way of designing that professional learning. So in the summer, it was general. Now we're saying, okay, in October, math teachers, you're with Pearl. Pearl's our math person, and she's also literacy, because every teacher is a literacy teacher. And so it's kind of designed that way.
So then Pearl will be training those teachers.
Got it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Great presentation. Again, thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Hinojosa, for bringing them to us. Thank you. As we continue,
I was just going to say thank you so very much, and especially thank you to our leaders. I know Ms. Farrington is here representing the other principals, couldn't be here, but all of this work couldn't happen without our school leaders. And you heard the teachers talking about their principals being in the work with them. So, you know, from central office, we can support, but the real work happens in the schools and with our teachers and our school leaders. So a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of work happening, but it is the right work, the good work. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
thank you again. As we continue tonight, our next item on our agenda is our General Counsel, Jeremy Brinkley.
Good evening. It's everybody's favorite part of the evening where we get to talk about board policy. And so this is our first big numbered update since trustees Correa and McDaniel came on the board, and it's the first one we've had in a while. And so just as a quick refresher, we have three main kinds of policy. We have legal policy, local policy, and regulation. Legal is a recitation of state and federal law, case law, and agency resolutions. It is not adopted by the board. And it's really for convenient reference. It's when you're looking at a policy regarding leaves and absences, the case law and statutory law regarding leaves and absences is going to be in the legal policy. So you know exactly which laws are relevant to that. Local policy is our board adopted policy, and that's part of what we're here to talk about tonight. And then regulations are administration adopted policies. And so we subscribe to TASB Policy Service. TASB provides us with suggested revisions throughout the year in the form of numbered updates. So tonight we're looking at update 117. These updates include revisions to legal policy based on changes in legislation and case law. They also include suggested revisions to local policy. Those revisions can range from small grammatical revisions to a reorganization of how the policy may be in the system, to large substantive major revisions based on new statutes or other things that have come down. We're not required to accept TASB's revisions. We often do, but TASB makes these suggestions. They are a vendor. And then we review the policy. So when we get it, administration reviews the revisions to make sure they align with our practices and that they're appropriate for our specific needs. We make any necessary revisions. We then present it to the board governance committee for review and discussion. And then we bring it to the board as a whole for 2 readings. The first reading is a discussion. There may be some recommendations from the board that we look to change. The board approves first reading, and then we bring it back the next month for a second reading. And this should be the final form. Everything should be right, just like the board wants it, and it gets approved and adopted, and it goes into our policy manual. So tonight, we're going to look at the legal policies first. I'm not going to take you through all the changes of those. They start on page 40. Remember, they're not adopted by the board, but we always bring them to the board for line of sight. You were provided with the packet of legal policies previously. Jason, I believe, sent that out. It's a roughly 288 page update packet. And so what I'd like to do is just ask if anyone has questions about the legal policy, any comments about any of the legal policies. We take them as we get them. They are what they are because the law is the law.
I'd like to make a comment from the governance committee. I know you all have had an opportunity to look through the packet, but specifically to DEC local, which is compensation and benefit leave of absence. It's a very detailed policy, and there's a tremendous amount of changes in there that really impact leave days. It talks about a lot of things that impact procedures and policies that our staff is very familiar with. In fact, Dr. Hill shared is probably one of the most referenced policies in the district. And it's a tremendous amount of changes in it. And I don't really think we should make it in a vacuum. So I had asked if we could maybe have a little dialogue tonight about maybe making sure there's awareness, line of sight, even providing staff an opportunity to respond and provide any recommendations and suggestions before we take action on whether or not what we want to implement. So I'm going to open up. I know Winfred's not with us. I don't know if Debbie wanted to add any additional comments. If you all need a minute to look at the policy itself, but it's very detailed and it impacts a lot of their leave and what they do today. And I want to make sure they have a chance to weigh in on it before we make changes.
And I would be happy to walk you through that one. In fact, the CH local, CD local, and DEC local. And we can start with DEC.
Can we do that?
Yeah, let's start with DEC and walk through that one first. And so if you turn to page, you know what? I wrote down all the page numbers except for that one, of course.
We'll start where you plan to start.
No, it's page 55.
Beginning on page 55.
Page 55.
55.
And so
it's 55.
As a quick refresher reminder, blue bold is new language, red strike through is deleted language, green and green strike through is going to be language that is moved from one part of the policy to another part of the policy without change. And then you're going to see some gray highlights, and gray highlights indicate local changes. So if it's not gray highlighted, that means those are recommendations from TASB. If it is gray highlighted, those are recommendations from administration. And so as we get to page 55, this was a really big revision to DEC, as Ms. Durant said. There are really three main categories to these revisions. One is that TASB recommended for deletion a number of sections in this policy. And after reviewing it, and I will tell you why in a minute, locally, we determined to keep those. And so where you see a normal font with a gray highlight, that's language that TASB had recommended deleting. And we determined locally that we wanted to keep that language. And so I never want to undo a TASB recommendation without making sure that you're aware of what was recommended and what we determined locally. The second variety of revisions is going to be new language to comply with recent legislation and/or best practices. The third kind of revision is going to be minor revisions to clarify the meaning of a provision or other grammatical purposes. So when we look at the language that was recommended for deletion, as a result of the pandemic, TASB identified the districts may want additional flexibility in the administration of leave. Accordingly, TASB proposed removing large portions of language and recommended creating administrative regulations to address these matters. Having looked at it as an administration, having looked at it with board governance, we determined that what's in local policy are things that the board has said that they want in local policy. The way I look at local policy, when we recommend local policy, that is the board saying, administration, you must do these things. When we create administrative regulations, that's administration saying, okay, here's how we're going to do the things that the board has told us to do. So we've always been very, very intentional, both as an administration and as a board, about what goes into local policy. And so the large swaths of deleting certain language didn't seem necessary for us as a district. And so we're recommending not to make those deletions. And before I go on to the new pieces of that policy, are there any questions about that? Okay.
I'd just like to say, because when we originally did this policy, it just clarifies everything and it makes it easier to administer when it's clarified in local policy.
So there are a few noteworthy additions. If you look on page 55, TASB has included a definition of school year that better encompasses all staff without saying contract year or duty year. It creates the definition of school year, which is helpful. If you look at page 61, language was added regarding specifically how to appeal a decision regarding the sick leave bank. Those decisions were always appealable through DGBA, but we just made it very clear at TASB's recommendation. At the bottom of page 61 and into page 62, this is a big one. So TASB added required language based on recent legislation providing certain leave benefits for peace officers, mental health leave and quarantine leave. So the mental health leave would allow 3 days of mental health leave per traumatic event for an officer who experiences a traumatic event in the scope of employment. This is above and beyond their leave bank. It doesn't pull from any of that. It's 3 days. They also created quarantine leave, which allows an officer to have leave when he or she is ordered by the local health authority or the chief of police to quarantine due to possible exposure to a communicable disease while on duty. Both of these leaves are required by state statute. And both of them have some pieces that we're going to work with the police department to build out what the administrative piece of this is going to be. We'll work with police department and HR to do that, just to make sure everything is very clear for the police officers. They know what they're entitled to, when they're entitled to, and what that covers. And then the last big addition, page 66, is a neutral absence.
I had a question
Oh,
though,
yes.
on the FMLA.
Yes.
Wasn't this existing language?
Which page?
I'm sorry, on the 62. One right underneath the quarantine leave.
So that language was added just to clarify that it will run concurrently with applicable paid leave and compensatory time. My guess is, I do think we had language that ran it concurrently, and they probably, rather than move it with a green, they probably deleted it and changed it. And whenever they do that, they actually strike through the old and put the new in blue. So it doesn't look like a shift in place because it is new language. But yes, we've always run FMLA concurrently with other.
It's not a change in practice.
Correct.
It's just a change in language. That's what I want to confirm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so on page 66, there's a language now for a neutral absence control policy. And so this is recommended by TASB. I have a cheeky little note that says, and endorsed by your friendly neighborhood legal team, because a neutral absence control policy really helps provide a bit of a legal liability shield as well. It ensures that everybody is treated the exact same when it comes to certain absence control measures, that nobody is given preference based on who they are or any characteristic of who they are or anything else. And so what that does is it provides an employee who has exhausted all paid leave, protected leave, and who is not eligible for accommodations under the ADA, that the district shall notify the employee he or she is out of leave, and then the district shall pursue termination. So I will tell you, that sounds kind of mean, but it's actually what we already do. So when an employee is out of protected leave, there's no more FMLA, no more TDL. We review to make sure that they're not eligible for an ADA accommodation, because unpaid leave can be an ADA accommodation as well. And if all of that has been exhausted, it's no longer eligible, no more paid leave, the employee is notified that you're out of leave. The employee has an opportunity to resign. And if the employee chooses not to, the district does then pursue termination. And I'm just giving that and the rest of this a minute to sink in to see if you have any other questions on that topic or any of these topics that we've discussed.
And the exchange program is new though.
The exchange program has been in there. That one's in green. And that we just, TASB suggested moving it from, I can tell you because it's going to be a green strike through. Page 61. It was up there and it's been moved down to the bottom of page 66.
Okay. And on 67, they're recommending that the sanction of abuse come out, but as a district, we're recommending it remain.
So yes, they recommended that a lot of it come out, but some of that we looked at and felt that it should remain.
Right.
And you know what, you mentioned that, and I see that title section should remain too. So I'm going to adjust that.
This is a lot of changes to their compensation and benefit leave of absence. So I want to make sure that it's awareness is given to all staff.
And so based on that, would we like to hold off on approving the first reading of DEC to allow that opportunity for staff to really review this and let it sink in?
That is a recommendation to the body from your governance committee. So it's kind of like to get some feedback.
I am in support of the governance committee's recommendation and willing to accept their recommendation.
All right, Dr. Watson.
So can we go ahead and just to make sure, I know we talked about this in governance, just to make sure everyone knows what that's going to look like is we're going to take this policy and go back and talk with staff, talk with teachers, take it to our ACE committee, which has representative teachers and community members on that committee, and just share it with them so they understand what it is, see if there's any questions, and then bring back any feedback from that to you all, to the governance committee.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and so if you will then flip back, I promise the rest is not nearly as intensive. If you will flip back to page 47 with me, we need to look at two other policies, CH local and CV local. So CH local is our purchasing and acquisition policy. There are a few different things we've done here. TASB has recommended adding language that would allow the superintendent to make emergency purchases if emergency construction, repair, or maintenance is necessary for the health and safety of our students. Do note, this does not waive the procurement laws, the competitive purchasing laws. So if something is above $50,000 and not on a cooperative agreement, we would still have to convene the board in an emergency meeting to waive the competitive purchasing laws. But what it does is it just really clarifies that the superintendent has the authority to make otherwise unbudgeted purchases in the event of an emergency, especially if we need to mitigate some damage, get somebody out there to get tarps on the roof so that water's not coming in a gym or a school.
Like we had to meet with the additional laptops that were needed with the pandemic. We had to call a meeting, right?
Yes. And then if you look to the bottom of page 48, the top of page 49, language was added locally by administration to clarify that board approval is not required for purchases above $50,000 that are made through a previously board approved cooperative agreement. And what this is when we bring you the co-op purchase list every month for line of sight, that's essentially what this is. Generally, in the past, when the board has approved a cooperative agreement, the board has, part of that agreement allows the district to make purchases off that agreement. This just really clarifies very, very clearly, and I know I'm using that word redundantly, but it makes it very clear that the district can make those purchases over $50,000 without board approval, as long as it is on from a board-approved cooperative agreement. And then, of course, the district every month brings that for line of sight, and you'll actually see one this month, I believe, with Ms. Westbrooks towards the end of the evening. And so then if you look to the, let's see, it's actually to align with what we're doing today. It's to keep doing what we're doing, but just it makes people more comfortable if it's in policy.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was going to say, where it says contract signatories on page 48, number 3, it says the superintendent's designee, but everywhere else we have designee deleted. So I'm confused. How are we engaging a designee at this point, but not in the other, but deleting them in the other areas?
So because this one is specific, so the rest of them are superintendent or designee. This line is actually very specific to the superintendent's designee. Superintendent or designee wouldn't fit there if we just said the superintendent may sign any authorized contract in the absence of the superintendent. So it again makes it very crystal clear that the superintendent's designee can sign an authorized contract in the absence of the superintendent.
So why are we removing designee from the other sections?
So that is actually a TASB recommendation, because there is a policy under the B series that specifies that any authority given to the superintendent, he or she can designate to a district employee.
Okay.
And so as a cabinet, we've actually created a regulation that identifies specifically who the superintendent's designees are, so that there are no issues with apparent authority, no issues with somebody thinking that they are the superintendent's designee if they are not. We've made it very clear who is the superintendent's designee.
So for example, my designees are only the chiefs. And so if maybe a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we went through policy and we changed it all to say the superintendent or designee. So this pendulum swung back again, and TASB recommending to go back to just superintendent.
Okay.
And so from there, if you look at page,
Wait,
oh, sorry.
I was just making sure she was done. I did have a question on this new section where it says exception for emergency contracts.
Yes.
We can, 48. You know, it's easy to define catastrophe or natural disaster, but on emergency, would there be any reason for us to spell out what that would be classified as, or should we just leave it as emergency?
That's a very good question.
Because an emergency to me might not be an emergency to someone else. So.
We have always taken, and I need to look back and see if emergency is defined somewhere else in policy, because we also have emergency meetings and other areas where emergency is used. We've always used that, taken that to mean a situation in which the board cannot be convened for some reason, or we can have an emergency meeting with 1 hour's notice for the board. We've always taken that to mean in cases where you just absolutely could not wait the 72 hours. This would be the same kind of interpretation from a legal standpoint, which would be a situation where we literally could not get the board together for to be able to approve this.
So where is that in writing?
I couldn't point to it right now as we speak. That has been our interpretation. But I can certainly look before Tuesday to see if we have a definition of emergency. And if we don't, if the board would like to create one, I can certainly take that back to the governance
We
committee.
need to create one if there isn't one available.
Okay, I will happily take that to the governance committee to look at. So can we look at page 49? Subparagraph 6 and 7. The language is being stricken regarding construction contracts and change orders above or below $15,000. And the reason for that is CV local addresses construction contracts and change orders. And this language is taken out because it doesn't align with CV local. CV local allows the superintendent to approve construction contracts below 50,000 and requires board approval for all change orders. And we're actually going to see CV local in a minute because it's also part of this packet. And then finally, well, I don't want to say finally because there may be one more. If you look in the middle of 49, we've deleted the language for professional services. The law allows us to procure certain professional services without going through the competitive purchasing process and specifies exactly what those professional services are. Guidance has come out from TEA identifying that district determined professional services are definitely no longer allowed. Before there was some argument both ways, but it's become clear that we cannot determine ourselves what a professional service may be for the purpose of avoiding the competitive purchasing requirements. And so we're just taking that language out because it's no longer relevant. And so that is it for CH. And then CV is on page 52. And the only big change in CV is that they've added a note that points back to CH local for the provision regarding delegation of authority for construction contracts in the event of a catastrophe, emergency, or natural disaster. So the only change there is to refer you back to CH for those emergency contract issues. And if there are no questions, that is our policy for the evening.
One more question. On page 48, again, number 1, where it says the board president may sign any authorized contract on behalf of the board. Where is there a policy in place that requires the board members to be notified prior to the signing?
The only way for a contract to be authorized would be for the board to approve it. So the board president is never
It's
never
not
asked,
after it's approved.
Right, the board
Okay.
president is never asked to sign a contract unless the board has approved it.
Okay, so I don't see that anywhere. So is that written somewhere?
I honestly, I would have to go back and look.
Okay, well, just, I mean.
So I will go back and look at that and I will bring it back to the board to let you know.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkley. As we continue tonight, for our next item, I'd like to recognize our Executive Chief of District Operations, Mark Miranda.
Good evening, President Newhouse, Dr. Watson, members of the board. I'm on page 68 of your agenda. This item is a recommendation for the board to approve the remote homebound waiver. This waiver would impact students in the general, there's a couple of acronyms there. I'm going to spell out what they are. The General Education Homebound Program, the regular homebound program, and the Compensatory Education Home Instruction Program. The waiver would allow admission, review, and dismissal ARD committees the ability to consider virtual instruction as an option for students whose medical situation would best be suited for virtual. Of the 3,300 plus special education students in the school district, only about 27 students fall into these homebound categories. Some of these homebound families are actually not comfortable with face-to-face instruction in their homes. And this waiver would give us the ability to provide instruction to these students virtually. And so this blanket waiver approval, this would be a blanket waiver approval that would be applied to individual students on an as needed basis. We currently have about 11 students that may potentially be supported through this waiver, provided their ARD committees can document the need in the student's individualized education program. Additionally, this waiver would allow Spring to generate attendance for these students for funding purposes, as long as all requirements of the homebound program are met, with the exception of the face-to-face instruction, which would be provided virtually.
I'm gonna assume that there's laid out criteria for what's considered or qualified as homebound, correct?
Yes, there's an entire process for homebound that's laid out, yes. Usually for medical purposes.
I'm just curious how many homebound teachers we have in the district.
Okay, I think I have that number here somewhere. Or Dr. Edwards can shout it out for me. She's in the audience. There you go. She can get to it faster than me. I do have it on my computer, but she beat me to the punch. That are falling into the homebound categories, yes. And keep in mind that these are teachers that actually go to the home, to the residents to provide instructional services.
Is there any reason a student would fall in this category other than medical?
Other than medical, Dr. Edwards?
I mean, I can't imagine that anything worse than a medical situation, but.
Yeah. It could be social emotional 504, but 504 is even medical, I guess, if you.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. We do have a variety of students that may qualify. All of the qualification requires that a physician informs that that is the necessary level of instruction for that student. So in some cases, we do have the majority of our students require medical support, which is why they are in a homebound status as recommended by their physician. But we also have students that, one student in particular that may have like a mental health issue that is so significant and severe that it prevents them from being able to access the general ed setting or a campus setting, even in special education.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Miranda. As we continue, we want to return back to our Chief of Innovation and Equity, Dr. Lapita Hinojosa.
Thank you, Ms. Newhouse and members of the board. I do have 3 items and we'll start on page 73. And the first 2 are acceptance of grant funds. And so this is always exciting to be able to bring this to you. The grant from the Houston Endowment on page 73 is for $270,000. And this is related to the project that we spoke about back in June. We talked about our teacher residency program with Sam Houston State University. And we also talked about the opportunity culture model that would incorporate our teacher residents into a year-long program. And so this Houston Endowment grant will allow us to implement and support the opportunity culture for 2 years. Then, if you have no questions, we'll move to page 76. The grant that we are also excited to receive is from the Communities Foundation of Texas, which is also being sponsored by the Houston Endowment Foundation. And this grant is for a total of $100,000. And it will help us this year in planning to add to research and potentially add what we call our ATSE schools or our additional day school year program, very similar to what the Clarks are implementing this year. Clark Primary and Clark Intermediate, you'll remember, started school on July 19th. And so have an additional 30 days. And so this grant will help us in the planning, researching, and preparing to identify 3 additional schools for next year.
I just have a question for the opportunity culture residencies where it talks about aspiring teachers. These are student teachers?
Yes,
Gotcha.
these are teacher residents, but yes, they would be like the student teacher model. But if you'll recall, student teachers spend maybe 6 weeks with us. This is for an entire year, both semesters, and they'll be spending the majority of their time, their week with us.
Okay.
So yes, and working with a lead teacher, a master level teacher, working side by side with them. Then it'll provide some lead time or free time for those master teachers to go and coach other teachers. So it is the opportunity culture residency model.
Gotcha.
Dr. Hinojosa, can you refresh my memory? The program is with Sam Houston State University.
Yes.
Have we identified or worked with any other universities in the area?
So previous to this project, we were in partnership with Texas A&M and actually implemented a teacher residency program at Thompson Elementary for approximately 4 years. And we've partnered with Sam Houston State University with the student teacher model. And so this year we're extending that MOU and going deeper with the residency program.
Yeah. Have we partnered or considered partnering with any of the historically Black colleges and universities in the area? We have 2.
Yes, so
Yes,
I've had conversations with Prairie View A&M, for example. They were actually at the onset of their new president being hired, going through a restructure. And so they're actually writing grants and determining who they want to partner with as well. But we've reached out to several TSU and Prairie View for this opportunity as well.
So then on page 78, we're actually bringing forward our high dosage tutoring contract with Intervene K-12. As you'll recall, we had a presentation back in August where we were able to share with you the results of this pilot program that we implemented during the spring semester at our iZone campuses, also part of Brown University study. And so through our ESSER 3 grant funds, we are able to bring to you now our contract with Intervene to work with our campuses in providing high dosage tutoring. If you'll recall, part of our recovery plan includes tenet number 4, which is that high dosage tutoring. And we'll have the opportunity to serve 28 of our campuses 5 days a week in small group ratio of 4 students to 1 with
Excuse me, what
live
page are you
tutors.
on? I
I
got.
think we are on page
It's not in the.
found at 78. It should be right after the grant.
Okay.
And you also have a purple folder. And my assistant reminded me to say that, and I forgot to say that. But you have that project right in front of you on in the purple folder. And so really excited to be able to put our ESSER funds to good use, to be able to serve our tier 2 and tier 3 students with this live small group tutoring program.
What is the discount and credit on there? The 35,000?
So one of the pieces that we are looking at is when we piloted the program, we paid part of it and the other part was also through a grant. And so we had days left over, which we'll be able to carry forward this year.
I noticed it has parent is on the intervene K through 12. Part of their services are parent and student at home support. What does that look like? Does that mean just communicating students' data or their actual resources that families get?
It is more the communication of the data. That's one of the I think great support systems that we have that we will receive, or the teachers receive direct follow-up, direct reports on how the students are doing on a biweekly basis. Of course, the parents, and then our administration, and then central office. All right, so if there's no other questions, Ms. Newhouse, that concludes my 3 items.
Thank you, Dr. Hinojosa.
And I'd also like to ask that they be placed in the consent items for Tuesday's meeting.
Yes, ma'am, you were reading my mind.
Thank you.
So about to say, as we review through these, they will be placed in the consent agenda for Tuesday night. Thank you. And as we begin to close, our final presenter, our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Ann Westbrooks. We always save the best for last, Ms. Westbrooks.
Always, yes, ma'am. Thank you, President Newhouse. I'm on page 78 with our first item here. And so the first item we have for discussion this evening with the board is a recommendation to provide a one-time supplemental employee payment to all of our full-time staff members in the amount of $500 and $250 for half-time employees. And so what this is would be a retention supplement similar to what we've done over the last past couple of years. Primarily as it relates to the continued pandemic. We're still operating under different circumstances and the expectations are high, but also retention of our staff is critical at this point. And I know Dr. Hill can definitely attest to it, as it is the daily life that we're living right now and trying to maintain our staff, and even more so our teaching staff, as we continue to go through these unprecedented times. And so the recommendation, as mentioned, would be for $500 for full-time staff, $250 for half-time staff, with an approximate cost of about $2.5 million for that payout. And it would be on the second December payroll check if the board were to approve this payment.
Do we have any employment, like number of days requirement, or is it just whoever we currently have on staff?
Yes, and so a copy of the resolution begins on page 79. That gives the details surrounding who would be eligible for it. And it also includes the information regarding how long we would need to retain the staff to prevent them from having the funds taken back. So it's for our employees who've been with us and who remain with us through the time that the payment is made, but also remain with us through March 11th, which is that Friday before spring break, so that there is some retention. That is the benefit of the district, which is the purpose of the payment.
Ms. Westbrook, and I'm sure it's probably in here, so they would, if approved by the board, this employee and staff person would be paid the second week in December. So, or you said second, what did you say? I'm sorry.
The second payroll in December, which
Second
is
payroll.
scheduled, yes, ma'am, for December 17th.
So what if they get paid and don't come back?
We would take the money back out of their last paycheck.
Okay,
Yes,
all
ma'am.
right, good.
My question, well, I guess maybe I wasn't very clear. Do we have a minimum number of days that they have to be employed with us in order to get the bonus? Or is it just currently who we have on staff?
Right. It's benefit eligible employees that are on record as of November 9th, 2021.
Yes, I missed that. Thank you.
Yes.
So do you think that should be in this resolution that we would take, and it may be, I may not be reading fast enough, that we would, or would it, or by, legally, do we need to put it in the resolution that the funds would be taken from their last paycheck? I'm
Yes,
just
ma'am.
asking just to cover us. Is it in here?
It's on page 80,
Mhm.
number 5,
Okay.
where it speaks to sufficient control of the funds and the fact that it's a retention and the district retains the right to deduct and recover the amount of the one-time retention incentive payment from an employee who resigns on or before March 11th.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Mhm. And Ms. Trustee Correa, your question, I believe, is addressed where it speaks to the employee of record on November 9th is at the bottom of page 79.
In our book, it's number 3 at the top of page 80.
Oh,
It's actually going to be both. So number 2 is full-time employees and number 3 is half-time employees.
oh goodness. Okay, I'm sorry. We are looking at 2 different page numbers.
Either way, I got it.
Okay, thank you. Were there any additional questions on that item? If not, then we'll move to the next item, which now I'm not sure which page it's on, but in my book, it's on page 81 and 82. Yes? Okay, great. It's the first budget review. And so I believe it's our first budget review with our 2 new board members as well. Yes. And so we are a fiscal year in June 30th. So our budget has to be adopted prior to June 30th each and every year. But after the adoption of the budget, we have 3 formalized reviews of the budget. The first one comes in October, the second one in February, and the third and final one is typically in June at the first board meeting in June. And so this is the first budget review of the 21-22 budget since the 21-22 budget was adopted back in June earlier this year. And so the first page it's in a format of a letter. And so it talks through the different funds and we look at the changes, only changes that have happened in both revenues and expenditures since the budget was adopted. So the first item is the general fund, of course, which is our general operating fund. And so we're looking at an increase in revenues of $29,738. And that's all insurance proceeds that we've received from various transportation involved incidents. Also in the general fund on the expenditure side, we have an increase of $3.3 million that's anticipated to add to our expenditure budget. The first item is an increase of $1.8 million for reappropriated encumbrances, which is inclusive of any of our COVID-19 prior year encumbrances. And what that means is when we are obligated to make a payment to a vendor, we issue a purchase order or a PO. And so that PO is issued to our vendor. And when services are rendered, we pay the PO and then it's closed out. If at the end of the fiscal year, that payment has not been made, but we're still obligated for it, we roll it forward and we reappropriate those dollars in the next fiscal year. And so that's what that first item is. The second item is what was approved at the last board meeting, and that is the mid-year raise that we gave for our bus drivers, the $19 starting pay. And then number 3 is we had a couple of incidences that I'm sure you're aware of at 2 of our campuses where we had some repairs that needed to be made. And so that's what the increase is there. And we do anticipate some very little insurance proceeds, but they have not been received yet. And that's different than what's included in the proceeds on number 4.
Ms. Westbrook, can you just denote what those 2 things are, since we have 2 board members who weren't here when that happened?
Absolutely. So at One High School, we had an individual that had a medical event and drove into the front of One High School's building and caused some pretty extensive damage to the entryway of the campus. And so the cost of that repair was about $145,000. And so our deductible on our insurance is $100,000. So anything that is below $100,000, we pay out of pocket. Anything above that, we would file a claim. In this instance, the driver did have insurance, and so we were able to recover about $25,000 of insurance from their policy. So those funds just recently came in, so they're not reflected here. And then the second one was at Eikenrow Elementary, where we had another incident where a driver drove into the building. And we had a little bit less damage there, but about $17,000 worth of damage. And so, and of course, in that instance, well below our deductible. And so the district is paying for that.
So that was an uninsured driver?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the other one was underinsured.
Underinsured, exactly. Yes, ma'am.
And
So do
we have no
consider-
recourse to.
I will defer that to our general counsel regarding recourse with, sorry, Jeremy.
It's okay. I would though prefer to not give legal advice in the open, and maybe we can talk about that real quick in closed session.
Thank you. Okay. And so with those changes in both revenues and expenditures related to the changes that were just listed, we're looking at a fund balance in general fund of 79.2 million. And that number should come as a shock. But what that is if we spent every single dollar, and we also know that we have a portion of our general fund expenditures that we will supplant using our ESSER funds for the 21-22 school year, and that's not reflected here at all. The next fund type we have is child nutrition. And so in child nutrition's fund, we had appropriations that increased by just $7,000, and that's for the reappropriated encumbrances for that fund. And that leaves a fund balance in general fund of $2.8 million. On the debt service side, we had a net increase of $170,000 to our other financing sources. And so what that is we did a bond refunding in July. And so we have the revenues, the premium, and the payment that we put in escrow to pay for the defeased bonds. And so the net impact of that transaction is a plus 170,000, but it's similar to when you refinance on your home and you have closing costs. Well, we had closing costs and we brought some funds to the table, but still materialized 13% in interest savings over, or net present value savings over the term. So that 170 is the net proceeds, and that 413,000 is the payout. So you net the two together, and that's what the district brought to the table to close the transaction. And so that was for the refunding that we did in July. And so that leaves a restricted fund balance and debt service of $73.9 million. In the special revenue funds, there was an increase in revenues of $5,066,000 and an increase to appropriations of just under 5.2 million, which would leave us with the fund balance in special revenue of 1.1 million. And with our special revenue funds, when we pass our budget, since we're at June 30th, we're passing our special revenue funds, we're allocating those based upon estimates because we haven't received our notice of grant awards. And so in the first budget review, you see big swings because we're adjusting to the actual grant awards that we've received at that point. The last fund type is the capital projects fund. And so we had a small increase to revenues of just $2,000 for interest income, and we hope to receive interest income of 2,000. Interest rates are still pretty shallow at this point. And then in appropriations, we had an increase of 1.3 million. And what that is we are allocating funds that we carried over in the capital projects fund and having those listed out for projects. And so those are the changes that happen in all of the funds. And then the last item is the staffing allocations. And so we added between the budget and now 53 positions. Of that 53 positions, 24 were due to enrollment increases, because we have seen that we are slightly above our projected enrollment for our students. And we had 24 positions that were added for that purpose, net 24. And then we had 12 pre-K positions that were added. And then the last big number of positions that was added was related to our classified staff, which is for our grounds. So with our grounds, we decreased our contracted services that we had with the company that was providing landscaping and grounds for us. And we used those savings to create our own grounds crew. And so that's what you see here is the addition of those positions using the savings from that contract that we had. So those are the significant changes that have taken place since the budget was adopted. And of course, there's lots of other information that's included here that shows the changes that have happened in each cost center. So if there are questions or you see a number that pops out, then of course we can talk through that. Or if you have questions between now and Tuesday, we can talk it through on Tuesday.
What kind of impact are we seeing to what we budgeted for subs?
Subs, well, we're using interim teachers. And so the interim teachers we're using a portion of what we had budgeted for a substitute cost there. But I do believe we still have a challenge with our fill rate for subs that aren't considered interim. And I'm looking at Dr. Hill in case you want to add anything to that.
Oh, we are, but as Ms. Westbrook and I have been working together, we have a vendor coming forward that will be helping us with substitute fill rates. We're getting that up off the ground now, so we should see them. I think they're scheduled to come in January and be ready to start providing additional substitutes.
I asked because I know with the pandemic and what's going on, we've had more subs and challenges in that area, and I was surprised it was the impact of the budget, actually. So you guys must have done a good job.
I have a few questions and something I'd like to point out to fellow trustees. If you didn't notice this, at the bottom of page 86, there's a nice pie chart of our expenditures. And it is always astounding to me how much we actually pay in payroll. That I think that sometimes people have a skewed view of this and don't realize how many people we hire and try to pay well, that it's 87.09% of our expenditures there. Also, when I was reading through this, I was very interested in how you present the data. I don't know, you probably do this every year, and this year I noticed. On page 90, when you're comparing the expenditures in each of the schools, that one is the schedule of recommended amendments to appropriations. But then later on page 94, you have schedule of recommended amendments to appropriations by function. Yes. So that we actually see what's happening there. And I just, also the staffing at the schools is on page 99. So there's a lot of information there about how much it costs to run the different schools.
Yes, ma'am.
On the
It's a-
breakdown for contracted services, because I noticed that's our second highest under the appropriations amount.
Yes.
And thank you, Dr. Jensen, for kind of pointing that out because it answered some of my questions on page 92. It shows some of the contracted services. But these,
So some of the large cost centers that
Yeah.
you'll see in contracted services, first and foremost is utilities. So that's going to be our second largest expenditure in the district. And so I always love to kind of ask someone, how much do you think our electric bill is in the district? So that's what you'll see there. You also, yes, so that's the primary large contracted services that you'll see in the 6200s, which is, yes. Okay. Were there any additional questions on the first budget review? If not, we'll move to the next page, which is our taxpayer refunds. And that's on page 103. We get a little bit of a breather, but only because we just sent new bills out. So the list will grow definitely as soon as some of these value protests come in.
Ms. Westbrook, I did want to ask a question about this because I understand that the homestead exemption has increased dramatically due to
Pending a vote.
legislation, and is that going to affect our income?
Yes, ma'am. It's pending a vote. So it has to go to vote first, and it would increase from $25,000 to $40,000, I believe, is the amount. Or did I-
Culberton was talking like 100,000 or I was just early on, I was hearing different figures.
And so it's still pending a vote. And so any loss of revenue we would be held harmless, which I keep saying, the more we're held harmless on one side, that's it brings forth the discussion of sustainability going forward. So if we lose the revenue because the homestead exemption has gone up, then we're held harmless on the state aid side of funding. And so it's similar to the compressed tax rate. So we're pushing the savings to our homeowners, which is great, but then the state is picking up the difference in that cost. And so it's all good things. We just want to ensure that it's sustainable going forward in the next legislative sessions.
I'm jumping back a little bit, I'm sorry. Can you just clarify on page 101, when it says reorganization, what does that mean?
So that's when, let me go make sure I'm seeing what you're seeing. Okay, so that's when, let me give a good example of a reorganization. I'm looking across the way. So I'll use Dr. Hinojosa for example. I think we've moved some departments around. And so if a department was at some point under Dr. Hinojosa's umbrella, and then we move it to under Mr. Miranda's umbrella, then we do some shifting and do some reorganization so that they show under the right chief's umbrella. So that's a reorganization.
Okay. Thank you.
I also kind of had a lagging question too, going back. You mentioned the maintenance, how we changed from the contracted services to an in-house. Do we have any other areas where we might be considering doing that as well?
Well, we're always exploring our options. So did you have anything in mind, Mr. Miranda?
Well, I would say one of the things that we're looking at, because you see the contracted services dollars that are pretty high. So one of the things that we're currently looking at right now is some of the maintenance well, maybe I should not say this, but some of the maintenance contracts that we have for regular services that we feel like we may be able to do that in-house. So we're reviewing some of those as well. We'd like to be able to, if we have the resources and the ability to do it in-house, to do some of these in-house and kind of shy away from some of the contracted services if that's possible.
Any ideas on the IT side? Because I know IT can get pretty expensive as well.
IT tends to be a little more difficult in terms of the competitive nature of the industry, which you all know, in terms of being able to hire the people that are able to do that, because they can be in these other organizations to they can offer them salaries and benefits from the public sector. But we are always looking at opportunities to have, a competitive team. So I think that's a really good thing to point out that we need to continue to look at as a school district.
I thought you were going to be talking about how much this intervening K-12 was costing. I mean, that is $2,438 a student who's being tutored. And that's through a computer. So that's pretty expensive.
That was on my notes to go back and really look at.
Yes, and that's funded through our ESSER 3 funds, which is a part of the recovery plan. And we did a little back of the napkin calculation yesterday, and we said if we were doing, I think Intervene is servicing just over 6,000 of our students, and it's a 4-to-1 ratio. And we said if we were to take the 4-to-1 ratio, we would need about 1,500 teachers to provide those services at $30 an hour. And it made the Intervene contract seem reasonable after we calculated those numbers.
Depending on the success of it.
Absolutely.
That's what's going to be really critical. Are we getting a return on that investment? Are the kids is the intervention sticking?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think that they certainly have the technology and the connectivity quite a bit to make use of it. And just a little family story. My daughter, who teaches in another school district, and her son, who goes to school in another school district, was interacting with my granddaughter, who is a Spring ISD student. And she kept exclaiming about how good her computer is compared to the other ones she sees. So I think that kudos to the IT department when you started buying these things and programming them and handing them out. So.
Okay, if there are no further questions or discussion, then we'll move to the next item, which is on page 106. And it is our report of cooperative purchases that exceed $50,000. And we've had lots of discussion about that already so far this evening. And it's actually the list itself, I believe, is on page 107. Okay, just checking in to see if there's any questions. Got really quiet. You two still reading?
Question on the social and emotional learning curriculum bundles. I thought, did we see that? How often? How are the POs coming in for that? I don't know why I thought I saw that on here before.
It may have been, did 7 Mindsets come through already? Is that the one that has come through and now it's Waiver? Yes.
Okay. And then my second question was the staffing services under bond funds. The second item, staffing services, laptop on-site imaging assets, tag and delivery, $750. And then deal line 2 laptops. So this total includes the purchase of the 750 laptops and then the company coming in to tag them?
Yes, that's the teacher laptops.
Okay, and then does that include all of the software?
It does, right, Jeff? Like Google Suite?
It includes the Windows operating system and then by our other Microsoft contracts, we'll pick up the other software.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there are no additional questions, then we'll move to the next item, which is our request for proposal for career and technical education products, services, and programs, and that's on page 109. And so with this request for proposals, we had 68 vendors that responded. And what we're doing here is ensuring that the vendors that responded meet the qualifications and have the ability to provide the services that the district needs. And if they do, then we recommend that the board approve them as a vendor who may provide services to the district if and when the need arises. And it gives our career and technical department, our CTE team, the ability to choose the vendor that has the right fit for the need at that time. So it gives them a much broader variety of solutions to turn to service the programs.
I found this list fascinating. It just really reflects how rich our CTE programs are. I mean, there was restaurant supply, welding, art materials, medical equipment, and some of these things I've used many times teaching teachers and in my classroom, like EdvoTech. You're doing biotechnology with that company. So, and the Barber Academy here, O'Reilly Auto Parts. You know, this is a great list. So for CTE students, I just love that they're going to get real equipment to work with and learn with.
Thank you. And it's always exciting for procurement when they have something that they're needing to do and they're on the list and they can just move on. They can keep going. That's always good.
Do we have any sort of max on the number of vendors that we would ever restrict our list to?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It all depends on what our needs are and whether or not those vendors can service those needs. And what we found is there are times when things arise and they need something done really quickly. And so it always benefits us when we have more vendors that are available. One may be able to service us this time, the next time not. And so we have someone else available. So we focus more on their qualifications than necessarily a count or a maxing out account.
I'm curious if if there are considerations for minority-owned businesses when we are evaluating criteria for vendors.
So we don't currently have a specific criteria that is associated with historically underutilized businesses, but as long as they meet the qualifications, then they're held to the same opportunities as any other vendor. But we don't have that specific language in any of our procurement policies.
Yeah, not necessarily a criteria, but just I don't know how that could look, but just ensuring that we are equitable in our, the vendors that we bring on that reflect our community.
Yes, ma'am.
So how do we do that? How could we move forward in implementing something along that lines?
It would be similar to some of the other committees that are put together to determine what that would look like. And of course, we would work closely with inside general counsel and outside counsel to make sure that we're handling the steps appropriately. But it would be a process that would need to be developed to make sure that we know exactly what the criteria is, that we meet all of the legal requirements for it, and then we would put it in place.
Would it be out of scope for the equity committee?
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, so it's governance. Okay.
Okay.
All right, Jeremy.
Ms. Rhodes?
So our last item is on page 112, and it is a request for proposal for vending prepackaged snacks. And so we had two vendors respond, and one vendor, we're actually recommending the incumbent vendor. And we had actually done business with the other vendor and didn't necessarily have a great experience. And so that's why you'll see quite a bit of a difference in the scoring between the two vendors. But we are recommending that we stay with our current incumbent vendor for those services. Yes, ma'am, Madam President, that's all I have unless there are any additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Westbrook. We appreciate your report as well. Thank you. The Board of Trustees will now recess this open session and convene in a closed meeting in accordance with Texas Open Meeting Act, Section 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.076. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussions in the closed meeting will take place after the board reconvenes in open session. The time is now 8:53 p.m. Thank you. We will now address the items discussed during closed session. Are there any motions?
Madam President, I move that the board approve the resignation and release agreement between Lamech Thomas and Spring ISD as presented in closed session.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
It's been moved by Deborah Jensen, seconded by Justine Durant, that the board approve the resignation and release agreement between Lamech Thomas and Spring ISD as presented in closed session. All in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion carries unanimously. Do we have any other motions?
Madam President, we do have another motion. I move that the board authorize the administration to post notice of a vacancy in the position of Superintendent of Schools effective February 1st, 2022 in compliance with Texas Education Code Section 11.1513.
Do we have a second?
A second.
It's been moved by Kelly Hodges, seconded by Carmen Carrera, that the board authorize the administration to post notice of a vacancy in the position of Superintendent of Schools effective February 1st, 2022, in compliance with Texas Education Code, Section 115.1513. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion carries unanimously. Are there any other motions?
Madam President, no other motion. I'm just gonna move that we close, but go ahead.
Hearing none, there are no other item on tonight's agenda. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Oh, yeah, no, wait, okay. Madam President, I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
I
We
second
have a
it.
second.
Second.
It's been moved by Kelly Hodges, seconded by Justine Durant to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. There's no further business. This meeting is officially adjourned at 10 p.m.